to Geek Salad's Retro Movie Reviews from the Geek Salad Podcast. I'm Andy.
And I'm Mike.
And tonight we start our 4-week exploration into the films of Studio Ghibli. Most specifically, why am I blanking on his name now?
Miyazaki.
Miyazaki. So we are going to be covering 4 films directed by Miyazaki, starting tonight with Princess Monanoke,
which is the very first Studio Ghibli movie I ever saw. It is also one of my all-time favorite movies in general.
Okay, awesome then. So, this movie's got an interesting history because I think this may have been the first one to actually get picked up with a major studio. I mean, the major studio is Miramax.
Yeah,
but
apparently it was funny. Apparently, Weinstein wanted to do some edits to it.
Oh yeah,
and Miyazaki sent him a samurai sword that basically had a note saying, "You don't cut."
Yeah. And it's funny too because that's kind of how I associate the Studio Ghibli films is with their American Miramax releases. These were all released essentially in distribution with Disney.
Yeah.
Which is, it's interesting in a way to think about that because Miyazaki has been referred to as the Walt Disney of Japan.
Yeah.
And he's kind of created his own. I don't want to say empire, but he's created his own studio that is so tied to the man himself.
Yeah, and dang, I forgot what I was going to say. The dub of this one was the very first one I saw. I have seen both the dub and the original Japanese one of this one.
Yeah.
And I know this may seem kind of blasphemous sometimes, but I actually prefer the dub on this one.
I mean, I've only seen the dub, honestly, because I was too lazy to figure it out. And let's be honest, there are times when if my attention begins to wander on anything, even if I'm enjoying something, I can at least listen to it. Yeah. In terms of dialogue and stuff like that, I am more an audible listener than a reader on that. And that's coming from someone who actually prefers movies subtitled. Especially stuff like Pedro Almodovar's films. Okay. He did a lot of stuff in Spain. That was I prefer the Spanish with subtitles versus what is pretty much some awful dubbing.
Yeah, I think the thing that for me pushes the dub a little bit ahead of the original Japanese is Morrow. Actually, I think Gillian Anderson's voice is the perfect one for the Wolf God. I mean, in the Japanese, it's more of a masculine voice.
Yeah,
and it works, but for me, like Morrow just makes her a lot more effective if she is more of a motherly figure than a father.
Yeah, and we are about 25 years removed from this movie now, and Gillian Anderson has kind of taken this on as her post Dana Scully thing. She will play the stern mother. She's played Margaret Thatcher. She has done more masterpiece things where she is the old dowager that I've had hot dinners. It's that kind of thing. And that's the thing too is I feel like because Studio Ghibli they essentially have well-known, if not celebrity, dubs.
Oh yeah.
And they also, fortunately, I know in the case of this one, have an actual good writer filter the translation through. In this case, it was Neil Gaiman, which I found very intriguing.
Yeah. First time I saw this was out in it was on 1999. It was the very first American premiere of the dub, and it was at San Diego Comic Con, the one San Diego Comic Con I ever got to.
Ah,
And after the show, they actually had this quick Q&A with Neil Gaiman.
oh, yeah. I was impressed by it because it's. I mean, we don't go into this much on the show. That Mike is a huge fan of anime. I am not at all. So it's refreshing to get something that isn't all. Oh no! I am an 18-year-old high school student. How am I going to get by? Oh, I'm going to meet this girl who happens to be a 3,000-year-old witch. Oh, and I was really kind of happy that
I kind of want to see that anime now.
That's all anime. It's like
that could be really interesting.
Based on like 15 different manga, it's the same thing. Hiro was an 18-year-old.
Yeah, Hiro was an 18-year-old in there.
Yeah. Then he meets the girl of his dreams, who happens to live under a curse and is a 3,000-year-old witch. It's interesting because, you know, much like Walt Disney took traditional European fairy tales, Miyazaki takes Japanese folklore, fairy tales, creatures, and all that, and works them into a story.
Yeah,
that is, it's admirable. It really is admirable storytelling.
Yeah, it's. I mean, especially Princess Mononoke is very heavily influenced by aspects of, like, you know, Japanese Shinto religions, and the gods and the forest spirits and stuff like that. And yeah, I know you're not crazy about the look of the forest spirit.
It was creepy. It was just creepy. It's like, oh, here's the deer, and hi, how are you? Oh God,
trust me,
what the hell is that thing?
Trust me, that's actually very tame as far as some Japanese creatures go.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
I
don't doubt that.
They have. I've seen this creature. It's in various anime. It's an umbrella, but instead of a handle, it's a leg, and it's got one eye, and it just hops around.
Yeah. It's funny too, especially thinking of Miyazaki's films with just the creatures in general, how there are shots of them where they seem benign, maybe even cute. That's that, and then you look at them in other cases, and when we get to Spirited Away, the creature in that one is just like, there are certain things where he seems kind of just small and insignificant, and then there's other times where he's monstrous.
Yeah.
But like the Kodama, I thought they were adorable, which, it's on his shirt. So I thought they were adorable. It was interesting. Their ties to God of the Forest, which is really, it's tough for me to put in the words because there's a lot going on in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I could talk for hours on this movie. I love this movie so much. But like, I actually texted you last night when I was watching it.
Yeah.
So this movie could not be done by really any other company nowadays other than Studio Ghibli. I mean, this movie is really made by a company that's owned and run by animators, not businessmen.
Right.
This is
also the last major film from any major studio globally to have been animated on traditional cells.
Yeah. In a business where every cell costs money, there are a lot of shots in this movie that are purely there for the aesthetic, for artistic purpose. And I can't see any of the CEOs of like Disney or Universal or anything like that saying, we can leave though. No, they'd be like, no, cut that. Time is money. We got to get this out. We got to get this down. No, like the shot of like it's just a rock. And you see the water just starting to drop down as it starts to rain.
Yeah,
and then you see like Ashitaka riding his red elk through the mist, and it's just him, just focused on him, just as he's riding. It's like, there's no real point to having that shot other than it's a gorgeous shot.
It is, and I know that like that's a big thing of Miyazaki's, like his entire kind of like his standard is that it's there to be absorbed, it's there to be enjoyed. The Ghibli Museum, you're not allowed to bring cameras in.
Oh yeah.
You need-
When I went up to the Academy Museum out in California, the top floor of that, they had a massive Studio Ghibli, technically Miyazaki,
yeah,
huge display exhibit. And yeah, you could not take your phones out.
Yep.
It was no cameras nowhere in there.
Yep. And even though there is a theme park, I guess, that is opening.
Yeah.
There's no rides. It's all just scenery and vistas and all that. It's something to be looked at and absorbed, and not. I don't want to say experienced, because there is, it's there to kind of take in. And that's a lot of this movie. I mean, you're right. To your point about like just kind of like, the Hollywood bean counters, that there is no movie where the third act, you are like 20 minutes into the third act and there's still 45 minutes left of movie to go. We had to pause because my kids watch it with me, and it's like, okay, take a break, popcorn, bathroom, whatever. How much time is left on this? 45 minutes! This movie felt like it was wrapping up.
Actually, I'm kind of curious. I could think that Scarlett probably would enjoy this. I don't think Jamie would.
All right, so they actually both enjoyed it.
Oh, nice.
To be honest, they both like Spirited Away better.
It's much more family friendly.
It is. This movie is. It was PG-13. My kids have seen. My son has seen PG-13 movies before. He's seen practically all the Marvel movies. So I'm not worried about that. So stuff like, like the arrows decapitating people, which thankfully they explained away immediately.
Yeah.
Demon hand.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take you for the.
Yeah, cuts the arms off cleanly.
Yeah, I think it's the thing too, because of the movie's message of we need to care for our environment. My kids are still at that age where it's like the message movies are almost like pointing the finger of shame directly at them, and I'm like, no, it's not you. This is just a message that everybody's gotta look at. So they kind of felt like that was a part that might have hampered their enjoyment. Whereas like Spirited Away, which we watched 2 years ago, like right at the beginning of the pandemic, they enjoyed that more.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair though, the environmental message, I mean, it's a big part of this movie, but what I love is that Ashitaka is the one in the middle. San is a very extreme one side. Lady Eboshi is extreme the other side, and this movie goes out of its way of saying neither of those extremes are the right way.
Right.
Ashitaka is the one that's saying no. We've got to live in balance with nature. We have and nature's got to live in balance with us. We have to coexist.
Yeah. And when you get down to it, I mean, like the real villains of the film is Jigo and his men.
And even then, it's.
But even so, exactly.
He's just trying to do what he needs to survive, really.
Right, exactly, and that's take the head of the forest god. It's
not a good idea in hindsight, but
Yeah, no, that was like one of those things where I'm like, listening, like, why do I know Jigo's voice? It's immediately to IMDb.
Billy Bob Thornton.
Actually,
this movie's got a really stellar dub cast.
Yeah, which shame on me also, because Clayface has been impersonating Billy Bob Thornton throughout all of this season of Harley Quinn. So it's like, why didn't I pick that up? But no, you're right. Claire Danes, Billy Crudup, Minnie Driver, Jada Pinkett Smith, Gillian Anderson, Keith David. I mean, how could you just...
Oh, yeah.
There's a voice. He's like...
he's the first voice you hear.
Yeah, he's Okoto, which, oh, God, the blood just pouring out of that boar. Oof.
Yeah.
Um, it was interesting to watching this movie because for something like this that, for me and my kids watching it, we try to keep it as much of a snark-free zone as possible. I will say that when the apes show up, first of all, the animation on the apes look like the old Herculoids cartoons. There are characters in the Herculoids that look just like the
Oh,
apes.
I know what you're talking about. Well, I
Yep.
mean, for the first time you see the apes, they're just kind of more in silhouette.
I had
And
no
then
idea what they were until, it's just like, what do the apes want?
yeah.
And then I was just like, and then there was like, hand us the boy. It is ape law.
All right, I'll give you that one. I'll give you that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. It's overall, it's interesting with this movie because you can't fault it for its length, because if you fault it for its length, then you don't get some of those gorgeous,
Yeah.
hand-drawn animation. But it's a pacing thing, and it's just like, I mean, these movies are really good. Now, certain Studio Ghibli movies I feel a little more entertaining than this one. This one's got a gorgeous message. This one is as cinematic as a Studio Ghibli film gets.
Yeah.
From the very little I've seen, I'm going to do the majority of my Studio Ghibli viewing during these 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And one of the movies I've already seen before, that's Spirited Away, which is coming up.
In all honesty, I've actually only seen 3 Studio Ghibli movies. We're going to be covering all 3 of them, and so the 4th one we're going to put on as a Twitter poll, and it's going to be one that neither of us have ever seen.
Right, so that's going to be very, very interesting. So I can't wait to see what that one's going to be. But yeah, it's just like, it's one of those things that I found more entertaining Studio Ghibli films, because this, I don't want to say it meanders, but there are points when, it's just like, all right.
I didn't get that. For me, like, where something like Pulp Fiction, where it's 2.5 hours, and for me it felt like 2.5 hours. This one's like 2 hours and 13 minutes. It feels more like an hour and 45 for me. It goes by a little bit more quickly.
Okay. And that's just, it's just the way that we're watching these movies. But again, you can't fault the length, because then you get that gorgeous hand-drawn animation, which is just fantastic.
Oh yeah, and even like the demon boars, like all those worms, that's all hand drawn.
Oh yeah, exactly. I found that very. It's incredible. It really is incredible. And that's really kind of where my enjoyment of the movie is, just watching, just what a feat this movie was to make.
Yeah. Like I said, I could go on and on for hours on this movie. I mean, even just watching it yesterday, I've seen this movie a number of times. I still noticed something new. Like like they mentioned later on that the forest spirit is a god of both life and death.
Yeah.
And then you see that first time when Ashitaka gets to the realm of the forest god, with the 2 guys that he's rescued. And he's looking around, and you can see like all the bones in the water, and the islands are made of like dead creatures. So it's like, this is a place where creatures have gone to die, but also the life has sprung up from that. So,
right.
Again, just one of those little details that just makes this movie so amazing.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. It's all in the finer details.
Yeah.
And it is one of those movies. I feel like upon multiple viewings, you're going to pick up more and more and more. This isn't something you watch once and then, okay, I don't need to see it. I don't need to see any more. I've seen enough.
I would say, if I had one criticism for this movie, it's that the conflict between Lady Orochi and Lord Asano. First off, you never even see Lord Asano. He was only mentioned a couple times.
Right.
It's his army of samurai that's attacking Irontown in the third act. It's never really defined too much. I mean, they give enough to like pick up on it,
Hmm.
but I'm like, if this movie was like turned into like in like maybe a 4 to 6 part miniseries, they'd probably be able to expand on that more. But trying to frame it all in, they have to. That's like a very tertiary subplot that's really not. It's really not. Uh, hasn't any has no impact on the final.
Right, right. You want to keep it cinematic too, and that's kind of the thing with these movies is that they are meant to be seen on the big screen. They're meant to be
Yeah.
seen as this. Now, was this the one that got re-released 3 or 4 years ago?
I don't.
Well, the
think
20th anniversary would have been 2017. So
Yeah. They may have really re-released it. I don't know. I still have the original Blu-ray that from the when they first released them,
okay,
but I actually watched it on HBO Max because
yeah, that's what I did. It was
yeah,
easier. Well, that's the only way I had to watch it. So
yeah, you don't have the Blu-rays.
no, I don't. Yeah. Overall, I mean, I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. It was nice to get a better look at the Studio Ghibli product.
Hmm.
Because for the most part, for movies like this, Spirited Away until I had watched it, My Neighbor Totoro, it's always just images. It's just
Hmm.
still static frames. So being able to watch this, and you compared this to like the animation of Sleeping Beauty, which you and
Oh
I have
yeah,
both gone on record to say how much we love.
yeah.
Um,
And again, that was like back because Walt Disney again, same thing, an animator who created the studio. So especially his early stuff, he would take these moments where he wouldn't have them as many as like Miyazaki would, but he would
yeah,
have these occasional moments where it's really just there for the artistic merit,
yeah,
and that's something I missed from the original, like the old Disney movies.
yeah,
They don't really have
yeah.
those in.
No, exactly. Oh, the thing is also with Sleeping Beauty, that was a risk, and that
Yeah,
risk initially did not pay off
no, that is
for
true.
them, and that's kind of why that went away, and the Xerox style of animation came into
Yeah,
play. And with Miyazaki, at least in his home country, there's a bit greater appreciation for the art
yeah,
and all that, which is interesting too because I kind of like watch slash listen to a look at on the films of Miyazaki today and how low he holds like just traditional Japanese animation
hmm,
in regard. Mainly because themes, sexualization, that kind of stuff. I
yeah.
totally understand that.
And and this one actually it did pay off for Miyazaki big time. This was the highest grossing film in Japan until Titanic came out.
Yeah, yeah, same
Yeah,
year, so it's
yeah. But yeah, this was a budget of about 23.5 million
mhm.
and box office of 169.7.
That's yeah, excellent.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and that's kind of on the cheap too. I mean, I'm assuming we're talking about $1997 here, but
Yeah,
kind of on the cheap too, considering that there's a team of animators working on this. I know Miyazaki, it was in the trivia in IMDb, like personally hand corrected over like 80,000
yeah.
cells.
I believe it. He is the real. He is a lot of. He's a perfectionist in a big time,
Yeah,
big way.
yeah. It's like 143,000 cells in this movie. He corrected over 80,000 of them.
So this movie is literally his blood, sweat, and tears.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, overall, I liked it. I think it's a great way of kicking off our Studio Ghibli discussion. And anything else you want to talk about? I mean, the music in this was gorgeous.
Yeah. See, you know how a lot of times it takes me a couple of viewings of a movie to really get
Yeah,
into that. Like some of like John Williams can make his scores really stand out. Danny Elfman, to a slightly lesser extent, can make his really scores stand out.
yeah.
This one, he's I think is Joe Hisashi, I believe is
I think so. Yeah,
yeah, Joe Hisashi. He's he's kind of Miyazaki's go-to, and he is able to make his scores really stand out.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun,
Yeah,
dun, dun.
they're very good, but but the thing is that they're not in the forefront either. It's this
No,
movie lets the animation do most of the talking.
but like there are like when after Ashitaka has to leave his village, he's just riding across the Japanese countryside.
Yeah.
That's when the score really builds because it's just the visual and the music, and that's all you need right there. And that's why I love that scene so much. It's just so
Yeah.
beautiful, and the music is so fantastic for it. It's one of the few like just animated scores that I actually did buy
Oh,
in here somewhere.
it's there somewhere.
Yeah, well, I've got a lot of
Yeah.
CDs in here.
So, I don't know if you have anything else left to say. I know you probably have a ton that you could say. But,
Oh,
we are
if
still
we're
limited
going,
with the time here.
if
You
we're
got to
going
catch a plane
yeah,
tomorrow, so.
yeah, if we're going into detail, I'd have a lot more to talk about. But yeah,
So we're actually interested. What are your thoughts on Princess Mononoke? Where does this rank in your Studio Ghibli rankings, if you have such a thing? Leave a polite comment below. Don't forget to give us a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you're just joining us for the first time, welcome. We do this every week where we take some movies and review them. So last week we did a Goofy movie. This week we're doing Princess Mononoke. Potentially next week, and this is based on your schedule,
and
my
yours.
schedule, and the fact that Mike is going to be on the West Coast. I'm going to be on the East Coast. It might be difficult to manage, but either next week or the week after, you'll be getting Spirited Away as the next reviewed movie. So looking forward to that. So also, Mike and I host a little podcast called Geek Salad. You can check that out wherever you get your podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, you name it, we're there. The audio for those podcasts also drops here. Another reason to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check us out on social media at Geek Salad Radio on Twitter and Geek Salad Podcast on Facebook. And check out our TeePublic store, which you just find by using keyword Geek Salad Podcast. So, until next time, I'm Andy.
I'm Mike.
Go forth and be nerdful, and we shall talk to you later.